My father left a letter that could only be opened if my mother died first. My father died when I was 14 years old. A sudden heart attack in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. He was making scrambled eggs, and he simply collapsed. My mother screamed so loudly that the neighbors called the ambulance. Before she did, I ran down the stairs and found him on the floor, with the spatula still in his hand and the eggs burning in the pan. The smell of burnt eggs to this day. I cannot smell that without my throat. Closing up. In his will he left everything normal. The house for my mother, his savings divided between her and me. His watch for me when I turned 18. But at the end of the document, there was a clause that the lawyer read with an uncomfortable expression. For my son Caleb, enclosed is a sealed letter that must be delivered only in the event of my wife Margaret's death. Under no circumstances is it to be opened while she is alive. If Caleb dies before Margaret, the letter must be destroyed unread. My mother went pale when she heard that. The lawyer asked if she knew anything about it, and she shook her head too quickly. I was 14 years old and did not understand any of it. But I stored that information in a corner of my brain, where it stayed pulsing like a second heartbeat for the next 17 years. My mother and I never spoke about the letter. Not once I tried to ask her when I turned 18. But she cut me off. Your father was a complicated man, Caleb. There are things that are better left unburied. Her tone was so final that I never brought it up again. But the letter existed, kept in my father's lawyer's office. And every year that passed, it grew heavier in my mind. What could be so important that it could only be known once? My mother was dead. What secret was so large that it required her not to be alive to face the consequences? For years, I built theories. My father had an affair, and I had a brother somewhere. Maybe there were hidden debts. Maybe he had committed a crime. Every theory was worse than the last, and none of them let me sleep. At 25, I met Diana. I fell in love. We got married. We had a son we named Mateo. Life went on, and the letter became background noise. Something that was there, but no longer. Dominated my thoughts. My mother was 62 and in perfect health. She walked 5 kilometers every day and ate better than I did. That letter could wait another 30 years. 3 months ago, I received a call at 4 in the morning. Caleb, this is Dr. Vance from Central Hospital. Your mother was admitted through the emergency room. We need you to come in immediately. When I arrived at the hospital, my mother was connected to machines. She had a brain tumor. The doctor said it was aggressive and had probably been growing for months without symptoms. They gave her between 3 and 6 months. I sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her sleep. This woman who raised me alone after my father died, who worked double shifts to pay for my university, who never remarried because she said, your father's love was enough for an entire life. She was dying, and somewhere in a lawyer's office, there was a letter waiting for exactly that to happen. I hated myself for thinking about the letter in that moment, but I could not help it. 17 years of unanswered questions were about to be resolved, and the key was my mother's death. What kind of son feels relief mixed with grief? The following weeks were hell. My mother deteriorated quickly. The tumor stole pieces of her memory. One day, she recognized me, and the next, she called me by my father's name, Andrew. Come sit with me, she would say. Patting the bed, I sat down and played along. Andrew, darling, I was thinking we should tell Caleb the truth. He is old enough now, he deserves to know. My blood ran cold. She thought she was talking to my father. The truth about what? I asked in the closest voice to my father's I could manufacture. About what happened that night. Margaret, please don't start, I said, improvising, hoping she would keep talking. She looked at me with confused eyes. But, continued Andrew, he asks about her every time he sees a red-headed girl on the street. He stops and stares. He is 11 years old, and he still asks why his little sister doesn't live with us. We can't keep lying. The room began to spin. Little sister? I never had a sister. Or so I believed. Who is she? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. My mother blanked, confused. Margaret, is that you? How long have you been here? You need to eat something. You look pale just like that. The moment was gone. Her mind returned to the present. She recognized me as Caleb, and the window closed. I sat there for an hour without moving. A sister? My father had left a letter about a sister I did not know existed. A red-headed girl who at some point had lived with us and then disappeared. I was 11 years old when I asked about her. According to my mother, that means she would have been around 3 or 4 years old when she left. I started searching through my mother's house while she was in the hospital. Every drawer, every photo album. The albums were meticulous. My mother had documented every year of my life with near obsessive dedication. But I noticed something strange between my photos. From ages 2 to 5, there were pages torn out. Not individual missing photos, but entire pages cut out with scissors. Simone had systematically removed something from our family's visual history. In the attic, I found a box I had never seen before. It was behind 3 boxes of Christmas decorations, sealed with tape, and with a single word written on it in my mother's handwriting: number I opened the box inside. There was a girl's dress. Size 4 pink with white flowers. A pair of small shoes. A hairbrush with red hairs still tangled in the bristles. And a photograph. The photo showed my father sitting on the porch of our house, holding 2 children. One was me. Clearly me with my dark eyes and brown hair. Around 3 years old, and in his other arm, there was a red-headed girl of approximately 1 year, with the most intense green eyes I have ever seen. Eyes that did not resemble my father's or my mother's. I turned the photo over on the back. In my father's handwriting, Caleb and Lily, my 2 reasons to live. Lily. I had a sister named Lily. My hands were trembling as I held that photo. This was the secret. This was what the letter contained. Why did no one tell me? Where was Lily? What happened to her? Why did they tear the pages out of the album? My mother kept her clothes in a box marked with the word number. That night, I went to the hospital. My mother was awake and lucid. It was one of her good days. She looked at me with a tired smile. Caleb, did you bring a lemon gelatin? I always forget to ask the nurses for it. I watched her eat the gelatin while I decided whether to do it or not. The photo of Lily was in my pocket. Finally, I spoke. Mom, who is Lily? The gelatin spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. I watched her hand begin to tremble. The green gelatin shook on the spoon, as if there were a tiny earthquake. She set the spoon down on the dish, with a click that sounded too loud in the silent room. Where did you hear that name? I found a photo, Dad and me, and a red-headed girl on the back. It says Caleb and Lily. My mother's face transformed. It was not gradual, the way it was when she remembered something painful. It was instant, as if a mask had been ripped off her. What I saw underneath was pure terror. The same terror I had seen on her face the day my father collapsed in the kitchen. Caleb, her voice was a threat. I need you to listen to me very carefully right now. Whatever you find in that letter, whatever your father wrote, you need to know that everything I did was to protect you. Protect me from what? From the truth. What truth, Mom? She looked me directly in the eyes. And what I saw there was not the loving mother I knew. It was a woman who had been running from something for 17 years. The truth about how your sister disappeared. The truth about what your father did. And the truth about why, if you open that letter, Caleb, you're going to wish you had not. Her cardiac monitor started accelerating. The nurses came running in. They asked me to step outside. From the hallway, I heard her screaming, "Don't open the letter, Caleb. Promise me don't open it." I already had my phone in my hand, dialing my father's lawyer. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered. It wasn't the original lawyer. Mr. Abernathy had passed away 5 years ago, but his junior partner, a man named Sterling, who had inherited my father's airtight, morbidly specific files. Sterling here, the voice was thick with sleep. "This is Caleb," I said, my voice vibrating in the hollow quiet of the hospital corridor. "My father was Andrew. You have a letter in your vault." There was a pause, the rustle of bedsheets. "Caleb, do you know what time it is?" "My mother is dying," I said, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. "She has days, maybe hours. I need the letter, Sterling. I need you to bring it to the hospital." "Caleb, I'm truly sorry about Margaret, but you know the stipulations. The trust is ironclad. The letter can only be released upon the issuance of a legal death certificate. If I hand it over a second before she expires, I am legally obligated to destroy it." "She's terrified of it," I hissed, pressing my forehead against the cold glass of the corridor window. "She just had a panic attack. She warned me not to open it." "Sterling, whatever is in that envelope, it's tearing her apart. Give it to me now, so I can confront her, so I can understand." "I cannot do that," Sterling said, his voice hardening into professional detachment. "The instructions were absolute. The moment I have the certificate, the letter is yours. Not a second before." "Goodbye, Caleb." The line went dead. I stood in the harsh fluorescent light, my phone gripped so tightly in my hand, I thought the screen would shatter. When I returned to the room, my mother was unconscious. The panic attack had exhausted whatever fragile reserves her body had left. The doctors had administered a heavy sedative. As I sat in the vinyl chair beside her bed, watching the slow, mechanical rise and fall of her chest, I realized with a sickening clarity that we would never speak again. That final, terrified warning was her last coherent sentence to me. Diana arrived at dawn. She brought coffee and a change of clothes, her eyes bruised with exhaustion. She took one look at my face and knew something had fractured. "What happened?" she whispered, touching my shoulder. I told her everything. The confusion, the slip of the tongue, the box in the attic, the photograph of the green-eyed girl named Lily, and the absolute terror in my mother's eyes when she realized I knew. Diana looked at the floor, processing it. She was a pragmatic woman, an architect who believed that every structure had a blueprint, every mystery had a rational foundation. But as she looked at the faded photograph of Lily I handed her, a profound unease settled over her features. "Caleb," she said softly, "look at the mother you know. Look at the woman in that bed. She worked herself to the bone for you. She loved you with a ferocity that intimidated me when we first met. If she told you not to open that letter, maybe you shouldn't. I have a sister, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. A sister who vanished off the face of the earth when I was a toddler. My father left a letter about it that he knew would torment her. My mother cut her face out of every photo we own. I can't just let it go, Diana. I'm opening it. My mother lingered for 3 more days. They were the longest days of my life. I became a vulture circling a deathbed. Every time the heart monitor dipped, a shameful, monstrous jolt of adrenaline spiked in my chest. Is this it? Am I about to find out? I hated myself for it. I wept holding her hand, apologizing to her unconscious face for the terrible impatience burning inside me. On a Thursday afternoon, while rain lashed against the hospital window, the monitor gave a long, unbroken whine. The line went flat. The nurses rushed in. Diana held me as I cried, my grief genuine and suffocating. The woman who had been my entire world was gone. But beneath the grief, pulsing like the second heartbeat that had lived in my brain for 17 years, was a dark, terrifying drumbeat. It's time. The vault. Sterling did not make me wait long. 48 hours after the funeral, I sat in his mahogany-paneled office. The death certificate was on the desk between us, stamped and sealed. Sterling unlocked a lower drawer and placed a thick, legal-sized envelope on the table. The paper was yellowed with age. My father's heavy, blocky handwriting scrawled across the front, for Caleb. To be opened only upon Margaret's death. I'll leave you alone, Sterling said softly, stepping out of the room and closing the door with a soft click. My hand was shaking as I picked up a silver letter opener. I slid it under the flap. The old glue gave way with a dry tear. Inside were 5 pages of heavy cardstock, filled with my father's meticulously neat handwriting. I took a deep breath, the phantom smell of burning eggs briefly assaulting my sinuses, and began to read. My dearest Caleb, if you are reading this, your mother is dead. I imagine you are mourning her. I imagine she spent the last 17 years, or however long it took for the tumor, or the heart, or the years to finally claim her, playing the role of the devoted, sacrificing widow. She was always an exceptional actress. You are a man now. You have lived your life believing I was a good, simple man who died tragically early. You have lived believing Margaret was a saint who bore the tragedy with grace. It is time to dismantle the saint. By now, you may have found traces of her. Lily, your mother was incredibly thorough, but she was never perfect. I had a few things where I knew Margaret wouldn't look. I needed you to know that Lily existed. Lily was your sister. Not by blood, Caleb. By blood, you were our only child. But when you were 2 years old, your mother fell into a severe, crippling depression. She desperately wanted a daughter. After 3 miscarriages, her mind began to fracture. She became obsessed with the idea that our family was incomplete, that you were not enough. One afternoon, Margaret went to the grocery store and didn't come back until nightfall. When she walked through the door, she was holding a baby girl with red hair and green eyes. She told me the child was an orphan. She told me a wild, hysterical story about a woman at a bus station who begged her to take the baby. She named her Lily. I was weak, Caleb. I should have called the police immediately. But your mother threatened to kill herself if I took the baby away. She was manic, terrifyingly euphoric. And over the next year, against all logic, against every moral compass I possessed, I fell in love with that little girl. She became my daughter in my heart. We moved to a new town to avoid questions. We forged documents. We became a family of 4. But Lily was not an orphan. When you were 3 and Lily was almost 2, I saw a news report on a cold case. A child abducted from stroller in a park 2 states over. The age progression sketch looked exactly like Lily. Your mother hadn't been given an orphan at a bus station. She had stolen a child. I confronted Margaret. It was a Sunday morning. The argument was violent. I told her I was taking Lily to the authorities. I told her she belonged with her real parents and that Margaret needed psychiatric help. Margaret begged. She screamed. She threw things. But I was resolute. I went to the kitchen to make you breakfast, your favorite scrambled eggs, before packing Lily into the car. Margaret came up behind me. She was eerily calm. She told me that if I walked out that door with Lily, I would be leaving you behind, and she would make sure I never saw you again. She said she would tell the police I was the one who abducted the girl. She had planted evidence. She had orchestrated it perfectly to ruin me. I didn't listen. I turned back to the stove. That is my last memory, Caleb. I am writing this to you over the course of weeks, hiding at the office because my health has been failing rapidly. I am suffering from severe heart palpitations. My vision blurs. The doctors cannot find a cause, but I know. Margaret is poisoning me. Small doses. Digitalis, perhaps, stolen from her nursing clinic. She is killing me slowly so that it looks natural. She knows I'm building a case to take you and Lily away from her. I know I will not survive the year. She is too smart, too careful. If I am dead, and you are reading this, it means Margaret won. It means she kept you. But I leave you with this terrible truth so that her memory will not survive intact. She's a monster, Caleb. a kidnapper, and very likely my murderer. As for Lily, I do not know what Margaret did with her after I died. You were 14 when I passed. You would have remembered her. The fact that you don't means Margaret must have gotten rid of her shortly after my death, or perhaps she did something even worse before. Do not let her rest in peace, Caleb. Love, your father, Andrew. The fracture. I dropped the pages. They scattered across Sterling's polished floor. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, the mahogany walls closing in on me. My mother, the woman who had worked double shifts, who had held me when I had nightmares, who had smiled so gently in my wedding, was a kidnapper? A murderer? She poisoned him. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sunday morning. I was 14. I ran down the stairs. My father was on the floor, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with a terror I had never understood until this exact second. The spatula was in his hand. The eggs were burning. And my mother, she had screamed for the neighbors before she called the ambulance, to create witnesses to her shock. I drove home in a fugue state. When I walked through the front door, Diana took one look at my pale, sweating face and rushed toward me. I shoved the letter into her hands. I watched her read it. I watched her hands begin to tremble. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears and horror. Caleb, she whispered. My God, she stole a child, I said, my voice cracking. And when my dad tried to do the right thing, she murdered him. She fed him poison while he cooked me breakfast. But what about Lily? Diana asked, her voice trembling. Caleb, if Lily was with you until you were 11, how do you not remember her? I froze. The question hung in the air, a massive, gaping hole in my father's narrative. If Lily was with us. I was 14 when he died. I muttered, pacing the living room, grabbing my hair. If my mother got rid of Lily around the time of his death, I would have been 13 or 14. But my mother said, in the hospital, in her delirium, she said, he is 11 years old and he still asks why his little sister doesn't live with us. That means Lily was gone before I was 11. Long before. I stopped pacing. I looked at Diana. There's something wrong, I said. My father's letter. He says I was 14 when he died. He says he doesn't know what happened to Lily. But if Lily disappeared before I was 11, my father was still alive. Diana's eyes widened. He lied in the letter, or he's hiding something worse. I ran to my car. Where are you going? Diana yelled. To my mother's house. The box in the attic. There's something we missed. The box. The house was cold, smelling of stale dust and the lemon polish my mother used to use obsessively. I climbed the pull-down stairs into the attic, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I found the box again. The cardboard box with the word number written on the tape in my mother's elegant, looping cursive. I pulled out the pink dress, the shoes, the hairbrush with the red strands of hair. I pulled out the photograph of my father holding me and Lily. I stared at the word on the tape. Number. Why not Lily's things? Why not memories? Why a word so clinical, so disconnected? I sat on the dusty floorboards, staring at the cursive writing. Number. I flipped the box around. I looked at the word upside down. It wasn't English. My mother's handwriting was heavily stylized, looping and connected. Upside down, the letters shifted. The R at the end became an A. The E became an L. The B became an E. The M became a W. It didn't spell number. Read upside down. The cursive letters formed two words. Run away. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a label. It was a desperate, subliminal message from a woman living in terror. I began tearing the box apart. I ripped the cardboard seams. I peeled back the flaps at the bottom. Taped beneath the base of the box, hidden in the corrugated layers, was a small, black moleskine notebook. I pulled it out. The leather was stiff. I opened it to the first page. It was my mother's handwriting, dated 20 years ago. I'm hiding this here because Andrew never looks in the attic. He hates the dust. If I die, and Caleb finds this, I pray to God he is old enough to understand. I pray I was able to protect him. I turned the page. The handwriting was frantic, pressed so hard into the paper it nearly tore through. August 12th. Andrew brought her home today. He told me he found her wandering near the highway. He told me we were keeping her. I tried to call the police, but he caught me. He broke two of my fingers. He told me if I ever tried to take her away, he would kill Caleb. He held a pillow over Caleb's face while he slept until I swore on my life I would play along. God help me. I gasped, dropping the notebook into my lap. I read through the pages, the horrific true history of my childhood unfolding in my mother's desperate scrawl. My father wasn't a victim. My father was a psychopath. He was infertile. I was an IVF baby, a fact that had always emasculated him. He wanted a large family to project the image of a perfect patriarch. When my mother couldn't conceive again, he snapped. He abducted Lily from a park. October 4th. He locks her in the basement when she cries for her real mother. I sneak down and feed her when he's at work. I try to run today with both of them. He caught us at the bus station. He smiled at me, that cold, dead smile, and whispered that next time Caleb loses an eye, I'm a prisoner in my own home. I kept reading, tears streaming down my face, dripping onto the yellowed pages. March 19th. Lily is sick. She has a terrible fever. Andrew refuses to let me take her to a doctor because they will ask for a birth certificate. He says she'll be fine. She is burning up. She is so quiet now. March 21st. She died. My sweet, stolen girl died in the night. Andrew didn't cry. He wrapped her in a tarp. He forced me to go with him to the woods behind the old quarry. He made me hold a flashlight while he dug the hole. He looked at me over the dirt and said, "If you ever breathe a word of this, you'll be digging the next hole for Caleb." My stomach heaved. I leaned over and vomited onto the attic floorboards. My father's letter. It was a masterpiece of projection and manipulation. He knew my mother might eventually find a way to kill him or escape. He wrote the letter to strike back at her from the grave. He took his own monstrous actions, the kidnapping, the abuse, the murder of Lily by medical neglect, and projected them entirely onto my mother, knowing that if she died, she wouldn't be there to defend herself. He wanted to ensure that even in death, he destroyed her in my eyes. I turned to the final entry in the diary. June 8th. Caleb is 14. Andrew found a newspaper article. A private investigator is reopening Lily's missing persons case. They're doing DNA sweeps in our county. Andrew is panicking. He told me tonight that we have to pack up and move to Mexico. He said if the police get close, we will have to leave Caleb behind to distract them, or worse. He looked at the kitchen knives. I saw it in his eyes. He's going to kill my son to save himself. I cannot let him. I went to the garden tonight. I ground the foxglove root into a fine powder. Tomorrow is Sunday. He always makes scrambled eggs on Sunday. I know I'm damning my soul to hell. I know I am becoming a murderer. But when I look at Caleb sleeping, I know I would burn in hell 1,000 times over to keep him safe. If you're reading this, Caleb, forgive me. I took the sin so you could have a life. The smell of those eggs will haunt me until the day I die. But you will live. You will live. The Requiem. I sat in the attic for hours until the sun went down, plunging the dusty space into darkness. I thought about my father's letter, sitting on my kitchen counter. A poison pill designed to make me hate the woman who had sacrificed her soul to save my life. A woman who had lived the last 17 years with the weight of murder on her conscience, terrified every single day that her son would discover she was a killer, unable to tell him it was to save him. Whatever you find in that letter, Caleb, you are going to wish you had not. She wasn't trying to protect her own reputation in the hospital. She was trying to protect me from the trauma of knowing what my father really was and what she had been forced to do. Even on her deathbed, she was still shielding me. I gathered the notebook, the dress, the shoes, and the photograph. I climbed down from the attic. While I walked into the kitchen, Diana was sitting at the table, staring at my father's letter. She looked up at me, her eyes fraught with worry. "Caleb, what did you find?" I looked at my wife. I thought about our son, Mateo, sleeping peacefully upstairs. I thought about what I would do if someone threatened him. I knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that I would grind the foxglove myself. I walked over to the counter. I picked up my father's letter, the heavy, official cardstock that contained the lies of a monster. "Nothing," I said softly. "It was just old clothes." Diana frowned. "But the letter, what he said your mother did." I walked over to the gas stove. I turned the dial. The blue flame flared to life, hissing in the quiet kitchen. I held the edge of my father's letter to the fire. "Caleb, what are you doing?" Diana stood up, alarmed. "My father," I said, watching the orange flames lick up the side of the paper, devouring his neat, cruel handwriting, was a complicated man. And my mother was a saint. I dropped the burning pages into the stainless steel sink. We stood in silence, watching the fire consume the lies, turning 17 years of manipulation and hatred into fragile black ash. As the last ember died, a faint scent wafted up from the sink. Not the smell of burning eggs, just the smell of smoke clearing the air. The ghost was gone. My mother could finally rest.